Hey guys, tonight we drift into a dream, older than sand, more peculiar than a goat in royal sandals. You're reclining beneath a silk canopy, deep in the Egyptian desert. The air hums low with the sound of cicadas, and the scent of date wine still lingers in the folds of your tunic. Out beyond the dunes, the Nile snoozes under a sky painted in indigo and copper. You're Pharaoh, yes, you, with the eyeliner sharp enough to slice papyrus and a schedule full of ceremonies that mostly involve standing still and looking majestic. But tonight, something's off. The servants whisper about a strange visitor, a man from the west who speaks of mountain smoke and laws carved in stone. You wave it off until the wind brings you his voice, a language you shouldn't understand, but do. You sip lotus tea. Your eyelids dip like lazy sunshades. Then it happens. The world softens at the edges. Your ornate pillow deepens into sand. The stars begin to rearrange themselves, subtle at first, then unmistakable. You don't remember falling asleep, only that your skin tingles like it does just before a thunderstorm. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere across this lovely floating rock we call Earth, let me know your city and time zone in the comments. I love knowing who's dozing off in Oslo or winding down in Wellington. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing now, in the dream, but it's real enough that your toes feel the cool powder of the desert floor. The tent behind you flutters and vanishes. Ahead, endless dunes, wine-carved and humming softly in a tone only your bones recognize. You walk. The sky doesn't change. Time seems to fold politely out of your way. Then a shape appears, a figure draped in something impossibly simple, like humility sewn into linen. His sandals leave no tracks. He speaks, but not with sound. Instead, you feel his words thrum in your ribs like temple drums. These are not rules to chain you. These are 10 stones for your sandals. You nod, though you're not sure why. The man raises a hand. Behind him, the sand parts like curtain silk. A series of doorways carved from ancient stone appears, 10 in total. You feel a pull, soft but certain, like curiosity in the shape of a breeze. Walk through each, he says, and remember what you forget. You step forward, and as you reach the first door, your foot catches slightly, not on a stone, but on the edge of something invisible. Fear, wonder, last week's foot massage coupon? Who's to say? You push forward anyway. Inside, it's dim. The walls are made of light that hasn't decided what color to be. Something whispers your name. Not your Pharaoh name, but the one you had before power, before titles. A name you'd long forgotten. Then, a sound. Whispering, layered, like gossip at a temple bake sale. You turn. A gathering of sand spirits, their forms shifting like loose scarves in the wind, are murmuring. Not to you, but about you. They repeat the phrase, whispers in the sand, dreams in the blood, gods beneath the law. You try to speak, but your voice is sandpaper. So you listen. Behind you, a small breeze kicks up, scattering something shiny across the floor. Tiny hieroglyphs, each one glowing softly like they've just been told a secret. You kneel to read them and realize it's your own handwriting. Or rather, the handwriting you'll have in the dream. It says, "Do not fear the law carved in stone. Fear the silence that comes before it." You look up. The sand spirits are gone. The room is fading, folding itself back into the dune like a sleepy origami. The doorway ahead glows faintly. You step toward it. Outside, the desert is quieter than before. The wind has gone still, as if waiting for your next move. You smile faintly, not because you understand, but because something ancient inside you does. And behind you, etched into the stone just above the first doorway, a sentence you didn't notice before. The law begins not with judgment, but with attention. You breathe in sand, incense, and the strange certainty that this dream, this long, winding, sandy stroll through the divine, is going to get weird in ways your court astrologer definitely didn't prepare you for. You step through the second doorway. This one doesn't lead into a room so much as a courtyard, wide, moonlit, and entirely upside down. The sky is beneath your feet, rippling like water, and overhead floats a marble floor lit by candles that never burn out. Gravity seems to have misplaced your name, but you adjust. After all, you're Pharaoh. If anyone can maintain dignity while floating past a chandelier made of scarab wings, it's you. The second commandment whispers through the air like a harp string, plucked by someone who prefers metaphor. You shall not make for yourself an idol. It echoes, not in English, nor Egyptian, but in the language of mirrors. Suddenly, 1,000 of them appear, handheld, full length, mosaic, polished silver, obsidian, even one made of water suspended in midair. They float lazily in a circle around you. Each mirror shows a different version of yourself. There you are as a child, barefoot and sticky with honey, waving at clouds like they owed you money. There you are as Pharaoh, regal and bored, nodding at priests who talk too much about irrigation. And there you are, as a goat, wearing your crown. You stare. Okay, you murmur. I didn't ask for existential satire. The goat bleats regally. Each mirror hums with its own frequency, like a choir of opinions. They seem to ask, which one is truly you? And beneath that question, which one do you pray to when you're alone? A scholar once debated this very thing while eating fermented turnips in a library near Thebes. The turnips were reportedly terrible, but his insights were solid. He asked, do we worship what we love or love what we worship? You don't have an answer. The mirrors begin to rotate faster now, blurring into a ring of reflected selves. It's beautiful in that slightly terrifying way clowns at night can be. Then a voice, calm, slightly amused, unmistakably the same one from before, floats into the space. You've built many idols. Most of them look exactly like you, just with better lighting. You snort. Rude, but accurate. A mirror breaks away from the circle and floats gently toward you. It's not shiny. It's made of stone, dull and unpolished. You look in. There's nothing. Not your face, not a crown, not a single wrinkle or eyelash. Just silence. Not the empty kind, but the full-bodied, respectful hush of a temple after midnight. You find yourself bowing slightly, not out of habit, but reverence. The stone mirror dissolves into sand, drifting around you like ash. The circle breaks. The sky floor fades into a proper horizon again. You step forward, and the whisper comes again, softer now. The second commandment is not against art. It's against forgetting what art is for. The courtyard ripples. A door appears ahead. Not grand, not golden, just a curtain of reed fibers, like the ones in your nursemaid's hut when you were 5. You duck through it. Now you're in a hallway, long, narrow, and lined with papyrus scrolls that unfurl and rewind themselves without help. Each scroll tells a story, but the ink constantly changes, as though deciding mid-sentence which truth it prefers. This is history's workshop. One scroll pauses as you pass. It shows a moment in the 13th century Mali, a great king named Mansa Musa giving away so much gold during his pilgrimage to Mecca that he accidentally causes an economic hiccup from Cairo to Damascus. Oops. He pauses in your direction, mid-scroll, and says, "Don't forget, what you glorify becomes what you repeat." Then he waves and vanishes back into calligraphy. You keep walking. One wall whispers, "The gods are not flattered by statues, only by honesty." Another mutters, "The first idol is always the most beautiful lie." And somewhere, a papyrus scroll tries to write your name, but keeps changing the vowels, like it's trying to remember who you were before you became important. You smile. The hallway narrows into a spiral. At its end, a trapdoor, gently breathing like it's asleep. You push it open. A breeze hits your face, warm, almond-scented. You're back outside. Above you, the stars flicker in Morse code. You squint. Are they spelling something? Nope. Just winking like they know what comes next. A soft bell rings in the distance. You exhale, blinking slowly. 2 doors down, 8 to go. The man in linen is gone, but you feel him. Like the distant scent of fig bread you swear is real. You wonder aloud, if I dream of the 10 Commandments, do they still count? A camel appears beside you, nods sagely, and trots away. Not helpful, but comforting. You continue. The third doorway is barely visible. A simple crack in a rock, half hidden behind a bush that smells suspiciously like roasted garlic. You wiggle through sideways, the sandstone cool against your arms, and find yourself in a library so quiet it makes your ears ring. But here's the twist. Every book is humming. Low, like bees thinking about poetry. The third commandment drifts down from the ceiling, carved in smoke. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. You raise an eyebrow. Define misuse. A book nearby flips itself open with the flair of someone used to being quoted. You peer in. On the page is a conversation between 2 farmers in 6th century Mesopotamia, debating whether swearing by a god's name to sell a suspiciously shiny goat counts as blasphemy or just clever marketing. The goat, for the record, looked extremely untrustworthy. You laugh, then promptly apologize to no one in particular. A voice. Yep, same one. Dry as Nile silt, whispers from a crack in the ceiling. Names are not spells, but they echo. Careful where you aim them. You glance around. The books are now floating off the shelves, orbiting you like moths who majored in theology. Each one contains a different historical moment where the divine name was used with questionable flair. A medieval knight in France using God's name to justify inventing a soup that was mostly wine and boiled frogs. A 17th century courtier in China insisting the Christian God helped him win at Mahjong. He lost the next 36 games. And your personal favorite, a pirate in the Caribbean carving "In God We Trust" on his cannon, which then promptly exploded on the first shot. Irony, like cannonballs, can be lethal. You feel the books pressing closer now. Not threatening, more like toddlers demanding attention. One flutters open right in front of your nose. It shows you Pharaoh standing at the edge of a river, yelling your own name into the reeds. Just your name. Over and over. Why? To hear it echo back. You frown. That's not sacrilege. That's self-expression. A scroll snickers nearby. You're beginning to realize that this commandment is not just about gods, but about egos. Misusing a name, the voice tells you, is also making it too small. Shrinking something infinite into a slogan. Like trying to trap the wind in a teacup, or explain love using only math. Although someone did try that once in Alexandria. The result was a 400-page equation and a divorce. You reach out and gently close the nearest book. The others take the hint and start settling back onto their shelves, humming softly like lullabies in an extinct language. Then the air shifts. You're no longer in a library. You're on a rooftop in 1920s Istanbul, sitting on a worn cushion beside an old woman who pours you strong tea and asks if you know how to pronounce mercy in Aramaic. You shake your head. She smiles. Then speak only when you must, and never louder than necessary. A cat leaps onto your lap. It purrs in perfect iambic pentameter. You sip your tea, trying not to look impressed. The scene fades. You're back in the crack between rocks. You crawl out the far end and find yourself in a small glade, with the stars above arranged like a giant crossword puzzle. You think one of them spells irony in Greek. A stone beside you reads, "The gods do not bruise easily, but your soul might, if you toss names like stones." You pause, breathe in, exhale, then chuckle softly. So, don't shout the divine name in traffic. Got it. A gentle breeze ruffles your robes. You rise, dust your hands, and head toward the fourth doorway, which appears exactly where you weren't looking. The fourth doorway smells faintly of cinnamon and bureaucracy. You step through and immediately find yourself in a vast waiting room. Ornately tiled, dimly lit, suspiciously quiet, and filled with chairs upholstered in red velvet, most of them occupied by sleeping philosophers. The fourth commandment is embroidered across an impossibly long banner hanging from the ceiling. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. You blink. A bell rings somewhere in the distance, and a ticket number flashes overhead. 777. A bored-looking receptionist with a halo askew on her head waves you forward. "You're early," she says, yawning. "Everyone else usually skips this one." She hands you a clipboard, a feather quill, and a cup of weak coffee. You sip. It tastes like Protestant guilt. You glance around. In one corner, Confucius is playing dominoes with a monk from 14th century Ethiopia. Neither is keeping score. In another, a Roman soldier has fallen asleep in the lotus position, snoring in Latin. You settle into an empty seat as an old gramophone begins to play what sounds like Gregorian lo-fi beats. A voice whispers beside your ear, "Sabbath isn't a rule, it's a reminder." You raise an eyebrow. A reminder of what? The room answers, not with words, but with scenes projected onto the wall like shadows at nap time. A Babylonian scribe putting down his stylus and just staring at the sunset. A Polynesian priest spending an entire day watching clouds and refusing to name a single one. A 19th century Welsh miner lighting a candle only to sit still beside it for 6 hours, explaining that God's on his tea break. You laugh. Then glance around, worried someone will shush you. But the philosophers are still dozing, and the receptionist is now knitting what appears to be a scarf of days, each stitch a different texture. She pauses to say, "Even eternity needs rest." You fidget. This one's hard for you, isn't it? Doing nothing feels like failure. You're wired to build pyramids before breakfast and sketch blueprints during lunch. But this commandment? It says, stop. Just for a day. Let the dishes sit. Let the worries slow roast. Let the cosmic to-do list drift into the river with the reed boats and ceremonial ducks. Of course, the historians argue over the origins of the Sabbath. Was it borrowed from Babylonian lunar cycles, invented as a divine union break, or merely a polite way to prevent overzealous priests from working themselves into an early grave? One thing's clear. The idea stuck. Even the most chaotic of empires knew the power of scheduled stillness. The Mongols didn't take Sabbaths, but they did occasionally declare national nap days, especially after large meals involving fermented mare's milk. And you're now lying back on your chair, realizing that your body's begun syncing with the room. Heartbeat slow, thoughts untangle like old fishing nets. A man beside you, dressed in what looks like Elizabethan pajamas, mutters something in his sleep. Rest is a form of worship. You decide not to wake him. Instead, you close your eyes and open them immediately again, because suddenly the room is gone. You're lying on a woven mat in a desert tent, somewhere along the Silk Road. The wind outside makes the canvas hum, and a merchant with sunburnt cheeks pours you tea while explaining, "Every seventh day, I don't sell. I just listen." To what? He points to the sand, the stars, and his own chest. To what I missed while being busy. The scene fades. Back in the hallway, the cinnamon smell lingers. You look down at your hands, empty now, no clipboard, no cup, and realize that even your thoughts have grown quieter. No divine thunder, just silence that stretches gently, like a hammock between two dates on the calendar. And somewhere deep inside, a thought plants itself. Perhaps the Sabbath isn't just a gift from God. It's a reminder that you too are not a machine. You smile, and for the first time in what feels like centuries, you take a breath that isn't tied to a task. A slow, full, sacred breath. A breeze tickles the back of your neck. You turn. The fifth doorway is open, and you're ready to walk through. The fifth doorway creaks a little. You step through and find yourself in a candlelit dining room where everyone seems slightly too polite and just a little afraid of each other. The walls are covered in old portraits, all of them watching you. One of them winks. You pretend not to notice. The fifth commandment floats above a long table covered in bread you're too nervous to eat. Honor your father and your mother. There's an empty chair waiting at the head of the table. You sit. Immediately, a dozen family members from different centuries materialize, arguing in hushed voices, passing food, and muttering about how things were better before papyrus went mainstream. To your left, a Mayan astronomer explains eclipse cycles between spoonfuls of spicy stew. To your right, a Victorian governess critiques your posture. Across the table, an 18th century Korean scholar offers you a peach and asks, "Do you write home enough?" You cough awkwardly. "Sometimes I text." A medieval monk, 3 seats down, crosses himself. This commandment, you quickly realize, isn't just about obedience. It's about memory, lineage, gratitude, also guilt, apparently. A rich, simmering intergenerational stew of expectations and casseroles. The conversation is warm, if slightly exhausting. You try to keep up. Someone brings up inheritance law under Emperor Ashoka. Someone else debates whether filial piety is more Confucian or universal. A woman in a toga insists she once grounded a Roman senator for sneaking out past curfew. He was 37, she says proudly. But beyond the jokes and scolding, there's a steady rhythm to it all, a heartbeat of recognition. You're not floating in a void. You're tethered, rooted, held up by ancestors whose names you may never know, but who stirred soups, lit lamps, and worried you'd never get enough vitamin D. Historians often point out that honoring your parents didn't always mean blind obedience. In ancient Egypt, the Book of the Dead contains instructions not just for respecting one's parents, but also for protecting them from themselves. Apparently, even mummies needed reminders to hydrate and mind their temper. Meanwhile, in 15th century West Africa, oral historians, or griots, pass down not just names, but stories, flaws, and favorite snacks. Know where you came from, they'd whisper, and you'll know where you're going. You glance around. The table is changing. Now, you're seated beside a woman from the 1920s New York who's adjusting her cloche hat and murmuring about how no one sends real letters anymore. Next to her, a Maasai elder hums a lullaby his own grandmother sang to him beneath a sky full of lions and stars. Someone reaches across the table to hold your hand. It's your great-grandmother, or maybe someone who feels like her. You're doing fine, she says, with the exact softness of someone who means it. You feel something shift, not just memory, but forgiveness. For the times you didn't call, for the silences, for the goodbyes that came too fast. You sip from a teacup that appears suddenly in your hand. It tastes like warm apples and complicated affection. And then the dining room begins to dim. One by one, the figures nod and fade, like polite guests excusing themselves from a dinner party that's lasted 500 years. You're the last to rise from the table. There's a note tucked under your plate. It reads, "Tell them you remember." You fold it carefully and place it in your pocket. As you walk toward the sixth doorway, you glance back. The candlelight flickers. One of the portraits gives you a solemn little nod. You nod back. The sixth doorway yawns wide, cool air spilling out like a sigh. You step through and suddenly you're outside, barefoot in a moonlit field. The grass is soft and whispering. Fireflies float in lazy spirals around you. It smells like rain on stone and something older, something like patience. Above you, the sixth commandment hangs in the stars. You shall not murder. A serious one. You raise an eyebrow at the heavens. Okay, no pressure. But as you begin walking, you realize this commandment isn't exactly about violence, at least not in the way you'd think. It's about restraint, about the long, slow burn of learning to be gentle, especially when it would be easier not to. You arrive at a quiet camp where figures from history sit cross-legged around a low fire. There's no drama here, just weary travelers with soot on their cheeks and stories in their bones. You sit beside a Sumerian shepherd who once traded 3 goats to avoid a feud. Wasn't worth the drama, he mutters. A Quaker pacifist offers you a worn copy of a journal, scribbled full of prayers and grocery lists. Nonviolence, she says, starts in how you speak. Or don't speak. Beside her, a Japanese poet from the Edo period is composing haiku about frogs and forgiveness. He hands you one that translates loosely as silence after rage. Even the grass blade knows how not to draw its blade. You're not sure if he's kidding. Probably not. The air flickers. Suddenly, you're in the middle of an ancient court in Mali. The Mansa sits in judgment while elders debate whether a stolen mango justifies exile. They land instead on community service and 3 weeks of storytelling to orphans. Apparently, creative sentencing is timeless. A historian's voice floats through your head. Some scholars argue that "you shall not murder" was never meant to outlaw all killing, only the kind that comes from ego, envy, or fear. You wonder if jealousy counts, or passive-aggressive gift-giving. Probably. An angel floats by in flip-flops. He's handing out fig bars and mumbling something about Cain and Abel needing better conflict resolution training. You accept a fig bar. As the campfire pops and hums, someone tells the story of a 17th century pirate who abandoned his ship and became a monk. Too much yelling, he shrugs. Plus, sea legs don't help you meditate. There's laughter. You start to relax. You notice the fire isn't just fire. It's showing you images. People forgiving debts. Soldiers laying down spears. A child refusing to squash a bug just because it was there. The sixth commandment isn't a stop sign. It's an invitation to be merciful, to pause, to think, to choose not to ruin someone's day just because you could. You look down. The grass around you has grown taller. It wraps softly around your ankles, like velvet ropes in a museum of self-control. Far off, a coyote howls, but not out of menace. More like he's singing to the moon, just to feel something. You smile, because even in the wildest places, there are boundaries, and learning them is part of becoming fully human. You rise and stretch. Your shoulders are looser now, like some tension you didn't realize you were holding has quietly let go. The fire dims. The campers wave you off gently, like parents who know you'll be back someday. You walk on. The seventh doorway is waiting. The seventh doorway looks deceptively plain. Just a little wooden gate in a stone wall, with ivy curling around the latch like it's shy. You nudge it open. A soft bell chimes, and suddenly, you're at a wedding, not a modern one. This is ancient Babylon, somewhere around 1750 BCE, where gold-threaded veils flutter and flutes play long, wobbly notes that make you feel like you're underwater. Guests recline on low cushions, sipping wine and giggling behind their hands. A man with an epic beard whispers gossip to a clay tablet. Above it all, the seventh commandment flickers in warm candlelight. You shall not commit adultery. You blink. Yikes. Bit of a mood killer at a party, don't you think? But the commandment doesn't seem to mind. It hovers gently, like a librarian reminding you to whisper. A bride drapes flower chains over your shoulders and says, "The gods don't hate passion. They just prefer honesty." You nod, unsure if she means emotional honesty or just remembering anniversaries. The scene shifts. Now you're in ancient China, during the Tang Dynasty. A scholar is composing poems for his beloved. Problem is, she's married to a merchant who owns half the district. They've never touched hands. Still, the poems are spicy. Do intentions count? You ask no one in particular. A Confucian ghost pops up with a scroll and says, "Intent shapes the soul." Then he disappears into a potted plant. Classic Confucianism. You're offered a sticky rice ball by a smiling auntie who says she's been married 43 years. Mostly happy, she shrugs. We take turns being ridiculous. She adds, "Fidelity's less about rules, more about rhythm." A scholar's whisper floats past you. Some historians claim the seventh commandment wasn't only about sex. It was about betrayal of trust, property, even alliances between clans. Suddenly, you're in Renaissance Venice, where mistresses are hired like tutors and everyone's pretending it's all very literary. A painter murmurs, "Infidelity was an art form here." He offers you a brush. You decline. A priest nearby is reading from a love letter, his own, addressed to God. His voice trembles like a broken violin. You feel a little guilty for listening, but it's beautiful. You step outside into a night garden in 1950s Mexico. Fireflies again. Roses that smell like vanilla and danger. Two women sit on a bench, fingers just barely brushing. "No one ever talks about our kind of love," one says. You reach for a piece of papel picado fluttering on the breeze. It has a drawing of a heart, stitched together with tiny, careful lines. The commandment glows again. Not cold, not judgmental, just quiet, inviting you to think about what you promise, about the gravity of being someone's home. You hear a historian's chuckle in your ear. The seventh commandment may have been more about stability than morality. Civilizations don't survive on chaos. A dove lands on your shoulder, then immediately regrets it and flies off. Apparently, you're not very perchable. You chuckle. Another callback floats into your mind. Remember that pirate monk from earlier? You hear he fell in love once with a baker in Marseille, wrote her sonnets, never kissed her, but always bought bread. Sometimes restraint is the most radical kind of love. You look up. The sky here is like silk, rippling gently with stars. You walk on, past the flickering shadows of vows made, broken, mended, and made again. Because at its core, the seventh commandment isn't about purity, it's about presence, about showing up fully and without disguise, and not leaving unless you truly mean to go. You pass under a stone arch covered in faded graffiti, hearts, initials, one very enthusiastic drawing of two cats cuddling. The air smells like lavender and candle wax. You smile. You didn't expect to feel so comforted by a commandment that sounds so harsh. But maybe that's the point. You step into the eighth doorway. The eighth doorway is made entirely of iron keys. They clink like wind chimes when you brush against them, each one etched with a number, a name, or, oddly, a doodle of bread. As you step through, you land squarely in the middle of a bustling medieval marketplace in West Africa. Timbuktu, 14th century. Spices hang in the air like heat, and everyone is shouting, laughing, bartering, with flair and drama that would put any soap opera to shame. The eighth commandment hovers over the whole scene like a gentle cloud. You shall not steal. Simple enough, right? Until a boy runs past you, clutching a pomegranate and chased by a merchant whose robes are flapping like sails. You consider running after him, but a goat blocks your path, staring into your soul like it knows your browser history. Thieves are not always villains, murmurs an old storyteller by the spice cart. He's blind in one eye and chewing what might be cinnamon bark. Sometimes they're just hungry. The line between stealing and surviving blurs as you wander. A scribe nearby is copying texts onto scrolls. Some say this commandment protected property. Others think it was spiritual, guarding the soul from greed. You walk further, and suddenly it's the Wild West. Well, not the gun-slinging kind. More like a sleepy outpost in mid-1800s New Mexico. A man stands trial. He stole a horse to visit his sick wife across the desert. You sit in the back row of the dusty courthouse, watching the jury debate morality versus mileage. They'll forgive him, says the sheriff beside you. We're all just a bad day away from breaking a rule. The floor creaks beneath your feet, and you're now in 1970s Tokyo. A teenager in bell-bottoms is shoplifting cassette tapes. When you follow him home, you find out he's been recording mixtapes of traditional lullabies for his little sister. She can't sleep without them. He's making her a bedtime. You hear a historian's familiar question echo faintly. Did ancient cultures treat theft as a crime against the gods, or simply against order? The setting shifts again. Now you're in a library in 12th century Cordoba, Spain, where scrolls are chained to desks and a sleepy cat guards the philosophy section. A monk slips a scroll under his robe. Not to sell, to translate. Later, his translations will fuel the Renaissance, but technically, still theft. You ever steal a pencil and feel guilty for 5 years? You murmur aloud. The cat blinks slowly. It knows. You chuckle as your path leads into a quiet village in Papua New Guinea. It's modern day, and a young girl is carving a totem. She tells you, "We don't lock things here. What you take, You owe with stories. You ask, "What if I steal a story?" She grins. "Then you'd better tell it well." You smile. Fair enough. You pass a hut where someone's singing softly. Theft is when you take without giving. Behind them, the commandment flickers gently, less like a law and more like a reminder. Don't unravel trust for your own gain. Suddenly, you're back in the present, sort of. A neighborhood fridge on a Brooklyn sidewalk is filled with donated groceries. A note taped to the door reads, "Take what you need. Leave what you can. Thou shalt not steal." Hums again, this time like a balancing act between boundaries and generosity. A street artist paints a mural of the eighth commandment as a tightrope walker juggling coins, hearts, and sandwiches. A goat walks past you again. Same expression. Still judging. You think about all the forms stealing can take. Ideas, moments, credit, time. Someone whispers. Some thefts are loud. Others are polite. You glance up at the iron keys floating above. They start to rearrange into a bridge. And you realize some locks exist not to keep people out, but to invite them in with trust. You walk across the bridge of keys. They sing a soft tune as you pass. Next stop, the ninth commandment. The ninth doorway is a mirror. Not metaphorically, a literal full-length mirror. Freestanding, surrounded by a frame of gently glowing reeds. When you step through it, you don't shatter or vanish. You simply continue walking, and your reflection walks with you for a few steps longer than expected, as if reluctant to let go. You emerge in ancient Persia, Persepolis, during a time when truth and power are braided tighter than the braids in the queen's elaborate hairdo. The ninth commandment hums behind you, insistent but not harsh. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. It's not just about lying, it's about truth, especially when it matters most. You're standing at the edge of a royal court. A young noble is being accused of conspiring with enemies, but his only real crime might be saying the king's poetry was a bit much. The courtiers whisper half-truths, careful evasions, and flattery so thick you could frost a cake with it. Truth, a scribe tells you, was currency, but lies were inflation. You nod as a cat slinks across the courtroom floor, unbothered by the high-stakes theatrics. Historians still debate, you murmur, whether such courts valued evidence or just a good story with incense. Suddenly, you're standing in a confessional in 17th century Venice. A gondolier is admitting to spreading a rumor that a rival once ate pasta with a spoon. A spoon. In public. You'd think he'd committed arson, the priest mutters, clearly over it. You step out and into a 1950s newsroom in New York. A journalist is trying to decide if she should publish a hot tip, one that could ruin someone's life, but hasn't been verified. Her editor, an older woman who smells like ink and judgment, says, "Don't confuse gossip with justice." You're about to respond when the air flickers and turns warm. Suddenly, you're on a small island in the Pacific. The year? Unclear, but it's pre-colonial and peaceful. Here, truth is communal. When disputes arise, the villagers gather and speak in turn, often through song or dance. Everyone participates, even the dogs, mostly by howling at inconvenient moments. The ninth commandment appears as a wind chime, gently ringing when someone exaggerates. You ask a local elder, "What happens if someone lies?" He smiles. "Then we tell a better truth louder." You don't entirely understand, but it feels right. You stumble next into an 1830s English drawing room. A woman in a ruffled bonnet has been accused of stealing her neighbor's peonies. scandalous. But the real story? A misdirected letter, a misunderstood gardener, and a parrot that keeps shouting, "Liar!" The judge, who is also the local vicar, settles it by making everyone share tea and confess something mildly embarrassing. You learn more than you ever wanted to know about mutton pie, and perhaps about the fragility of reputation. False witness, someone says softly, wasn't just courtroom drama, it was social sabotage. In a sudden swirl of dust, you're now in a desert camp, somewhere in ninth century Arabia. Poets duel with verses instead of swords, their words either lifting reputations or slicing them to ribbons. One poet recites a line accusing a rival of sleeping through morning prayers. The crowd gasps as if he'd insulted their grandmothers. You ask, what if it's true? A merchant nearby grins. Doesn't matter. He didn't say it with honor. Now, you're on a subway train in modern Seoul. A woman sneezes, and half the carriage subtly inches away. Her phone buzzes, an anonymous message. Why don't you stay home if you're sick? False witness in the digital age is quieter, but sharp, and very, very fast. The commandment lingers above her like a silent filter, weighing the impact of passive judgment. You pause. Was that a sneeze or a metaphor? A historian's voice returns, half whisper, half yawn. Some scholars argue the ninth commandment was originally about courtroom integrity. Others believe it reached beyond, to anything that distorts another's truth. Back in ancient Greece now. You watch a philosopher try to explain this to a crowd while balancing a fish on his head. It's about intent, he says. Words shape memory, and memory shapes justice. You think about how many people's lives have been changed by a single accusation. You pass through a modern-day classroom in South Africa. A child raises her hand and says, "But what if I saw it wrong?" The teacher smiles gently. Then you tell what you saw. That's truth too. You exhale. Bearing false witness isn't just lying. It's abandoning someone's reality for your own convenience. The mirror appears again. You step through it once more, and this time, your reflection doesn't follow. It waits behind. The door to the 10th commandment swings open with a creak. The 10th commandment waits quietly behind a heavy velvet curtain, embroidered with tiny stars, shimmering faintly in the dim light. You pull it aside and find yourself standing in a small village square in early 20th century rural Ireland. The air smells like peat fires and freshly baked soda bread. The commandment itself whispers softly, "You shall not covet anything that belongs to your neighbor." It's a lesson not about stealing outright, but the restless, quiet wanting that tugs at your thoughts when you see the neighbor's lush garden or their brand new horse. You watch a farmer's wife eyeing her neighbor's prized cow, not with envy, but with a gentle curiosity. Is the grass really greener? She wonders aloud, sipping her tea. Nearby, a group of children play a game mimicking the adults, trading sticks as if they were gold coins. One child pauses, hesitating to take what another offers without asking, hinting that even in play, boundaries matter. You wander to a bustling marketplace in Ming Dynasty China, where merchants haggle with practiced smiles. Here, coveting is not just personal, it's political. A nobleman casts longing eyes on an exquisite silk robe displayed behind a stall. His desire stirs a chain of events involving trade secrets and whispered alliances. Historians still debate whether such desires ever truly belonged to the individuals or were simply parts of larger social plays. Suddenly, you are in the quiet hum of a 1960s American suburban kitchen, where a teenage girl flips through a glossy magazine filled with images of perfect hairstyles and shiny cars. Her fingers trace the page, yearning for a life painted in bold colors rather than pastel quiet. But then her mother calls her to set the table, grounding her back to the here and now. You smile, remembering your own teenage dreams, just as fleeting, just as tender. From there, you're whisked to the vast savannas of East Africa in the late 19th century. A Maasai warrior carefully watches his neighbors herd graze. Though he admires their strength, he knows coveting could lead to conflict, something their community strives to avoid. Respect is the richest possession, an elder says softly as you pass by. In an Australian outback town, a miner talks of the gold he hopes to find, sometimes dreaming of his neighbor's claim, wondering if his own luck will ever strike. The commandment seems to ripple through these moments, a quiet warning against the restless heart that always wants more. Back in Europe, 18th century Paris hums with artists vying for fame and fortune. A young painter struggles to appreciate his own work while sneaking glimpses at a rival's more popular portraits. His covetous thoughts swirl, but so does his determination. You know, you say softly, coveting isn't just wanting, it's the silent fire that can either warm or burn. You drift into a quiet Zen garden in Japan, where a monk meditates beneath a cherry tree. When a fellow monk mentions the perfect blossom on a neighboring branch, the first smiles and replies, "There is no need to want what is not yours when you cherish what blooms within." You breathe in the delicate fragrance, letting the peaceful wisdom settle. Before you can linger longer, you find yourself at a modern-day street cafe in Brazil. Two friends share stories of what they hope to achieve. One envies the other's recent promotion but hides it behind laughter. Coveting, you realize, often wears a friendly mask. The commandment's gentle voice reminds you of this quiet complexity. Finally, you arrive back at the velvet curtain, the commandment softly echoing in your mind. You pause, feeling a gentle calm settling in your chest. As the door to the next story creaks open, you prepare to step forward, the 10 Commandments having woven a soft tapestry around your thoughts. You step forward into the cool shadow of a giant ancient olive tree, its branches twisting like the stories of those who have sat beneath it for centuries. The air smells faintly of earth and sun-warmed leaves. The setting is the Mediterranean coast during the time of the early Christian communities, small gatherings of believers navigating faith and daily life. The voice of the narrator, calm and soothing, reminds you gently of the commandments you've traveled through, the laws meant to guide hearts and minds. This section centers on the delicate balance between law and grace, a dance as old as the hills themselves. You watch a village elder teach children the commandments not just as rules, but as gentle invitations to love, to forgive, to live simply. One child asks, "Why must we follow these rules if God is merciful?" The elder smiles, "Because mercy grows best in soil tilled by care." Nearby, you see a baker shaping loaves with tender hands, humming softly as if the act itself is prayer. The historical moment deepens as you observe how early Christians reconciled the commandments with newfound teachings of compassion, turning laws into lessons of the heart rather than mere obligations. You notice how laughter bubbles up even in sermons, stories told with a wink and a smile, reminding everyone that faith isn't solemn, it's alive, messy, and often funny. A scholar's whisper floats by. Did the commandments shift meaning as they pass through cultures? Scholars debate. You wander further, finding a scribe carefully copying texts by candlelight. the flickering flame dancing with the shadows of ancient wisdom. Outside, the scent of wildflowers and olive oil mingles with the low murmur of prayers sung in softly lilting voices. You pause to listen to the stories of those who held these commandments close, even when the world seemed harsh and uncertain. And in that quiet moment, you almost feel the warmth of a community wrapped in gentle faith, where rules are not chains, but soft blankets for the soul. As you prepare to move on, you catch sight of a small bird perched on a nearby branch, its song blending with the hum of the evening. You wonder if this too is part of the commandment's message: simple, natural, and full of grace. The journey continues. The Abbey's hidden humor. Life in the Abbey carries on, but with an undercurrent of gentle humor that no one quite admits aloud. You notice it in small moments. A monk mispronouncing a Latin prayer, and the stifled giggles that follow. A brother's habit of mixing up the days of fasting and feasting. The abbot's subtle jokes hidden in sermons that cause quiet smiles. The softened commandments have somehow opened a door to this lightness, this ability to find joy even in the most serious of places. One day, during a scriptorium session, Brother Thomas accidentally writes, "Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's cow," instead of wife. The room erupts in barely contained chuckles. You realize the commandments are not just laws, but stories, stories that can be told with a wink and a nod, teaching through warmth rather than fear. This humor doesn't diminish their power. Instead, it invites a deeper connection. You find yourself laughing softly, feeling closer to the divine in those moments of shared lightness. It's a reminder that even on the day of judgment, perhaps there's room for a smile, a laugh, and a knowing glance. After all, the smallest feather can tip the scales not just of law, but of joy. The ripple effect of mercy. The softened commandments begin to ripple beyond the Abbey, touching the lives of villagers, merchants, and travelers alike. In the bustling market town nearby, you hear tales of people who pause before anger, choosing instead to try patience, inspired by the gentle phrasing in your scroll. A farmer recounts how he forgave a neighbor's stray pig that trampled his crops, thinking, "Well, they're only trying." Even the town's grumpy baker, notorious for his sharp tongue, has softened, offering an extra loaf with a shy smile. You realize the commandments, once distant rules carved in stone, have become living whispers guiding hearts toward mercy. The abbot tells you that mercy is the divine's quiet invitation to heal, to mend, and to grow. And in this invitation, the smallest mistakes, like your feather's tiny slip, may become the greatest gifts. You sit beneath the ancient oak outside the abbey, watching leaves dance in the breeze, and marvel at how something so small can change so much. The divine plan, you think, might be less about perfection and more about love's gentle, forgiving hand. As night falls, you feel a profound peace, knowing that the story you helped write is still unfolding. A monk's quiet reflection. One evening, as the abbey settles into its familiar hush, you find yourself alone in the chapel, candlelight flickering softly against the ancient stone. You reflect on the journey, the trembling quill, the gentle errors, and the unexpected kindness that followed. It occurs to you that faith is not a rigid path, but a winding road, filled with detours and discoveries. You recall Brother Alric's words about God guiding the quill, and you feel a quiet comfort in the thought that even mistakes can be part of a divine conversation. The commandments, once cold and unyielding, now speak in tones of mercy and humor. You feel grateful for the tiny slip that softened their voice, making them more approachable, more human. As you kneel to pray, you whisper a humble thanks, not for perfection, but for the grace to try. The abbey breathes around you, a gentle embrace of history, faith, and the quiet power of change. You close your eyes, heart light, ready to rest in the gentle care of the divine. The Last Feather's Legacy. Years later, the scroll you wrote, with its gentle phrasing, has become a treasured relic, passed down through generations of monks and pilgrims. It's studied not for its strictness, but for the warmth it brings to those who read it. Pilgrims speak of the scroll as a reminder that even divine laws can carry a touch of kindness and humor. You hear stories of people who find comfort in the softened words during difficult times, feeling less fear and more hope. The abbey itself seems to glow a little brighter, as if the tiny mistake has left a lasting light. You realize that the true legacy of your feather slip is not just in the words, but in the gentle spirit it inspired. In this, you find peace, knowing that imperfection can be a bridge to grace. As you lay down your quill for the last time, you smile softly. The story continues, carried by those who dare to try, to forgive, and to love with a gentle heart.